Today's presenter is Joel Volinski. Joel is the director of the National Center for Transit Research at USF, where he manages the largest university-based transit research program in the country. NCTR, or what we refer to as NECTR, has produced over 140 reports of direct benefit to operating transit agencies and commuter assistance programs. The reports he has personally authored have focused on improving the management of transit systems and making them greater community assets. He has made over 50 presentations at the state and national transit conferences. He's also an ambassador emeritus for the TCRP program and the author of 3 TCRP reports. Prior to joining the research faculty at USF, Mr. Volinski was the director of Broward County Transit, the second largest transit system in Florida from '83 to '93. And during his tenure there, that agency led the nation in increases in ridership and passengers per mile for 6 years. He's the longest serving member in the history of the Board of Directors of Florida Public Transportation Association, having served in every officer position. He is also a member of the Council of University Transportation Centers Executive Board. He's earned his master's from Columbia in urban planning, and he's a graduate of the first leadership APTA class and the chairman of its alumni association, as well as a member of numerous TRB and APTA committees. So with that, Joel, it's all yours.
Phil, thank you very much. And just let me make sure, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, and let me also extend my thanks to everyone that is watching and listening today, and for those who will watch or listen on a recorded basis later on at whatever time is convenient for them. The subject of today's webinar is a project entitled, what you see on the screen here, Maintaining Transit Effectiveness Under Major Fiscal Constraints. This project is one that's been funded by the TCRP synthesis program. The project goes by the name of, or number of SAA 30, and it's due to be published early next year. The intent of this project was to identify actions that transit agencies have taken as they have dealt with the difficulties of the Great Recession and the economic downturn that most of us experienced. How have they maintained their effectiveness in terms of providing service of a quality and in keeping with community values, even while their normal sources of revenue were being reduced by anywhere from 5 to 30%. The project really looked at identifying the savings that could be generated within the transit agency from various positions within the agency and what new revenues might be generated so that they could provide as much service as possible, and also asked how agencies dealt with the leadership required when you're going through such drastic changes, and how they also dealt with the public. I should say that I want to thank a number of people here, not individually, but the project panel that was established for this project by TCRP, to Donna Vlasic, who manages the project as part of the synthesis program there at TCRP, and most particularly for the agencies that responded to the survey for this project, which was not easy. There were at least 80 questions, many of which were open-ended and required a lot of thought. And those are the type of surveys that agencies typically hate. But they were extremely generous in their time in providing responses. And we'll take a look at who responded to that in just a moment. The survey was sent out to 46 different transit agencies throughout the country. In addition, we did a very extensive literature search, not just with scholarly articles from the TRID database, but perhaps more importantly, scouring recent articles from newspapers around the country and from journals and periodicals produced within the transit industry. In addition to that, I've done this sort of research on this subject since 1996, so I've kept in touch with many dozens, if not hundreds, of transit managers around the country since that time, and I've communicated with them, asking them similar questions over the years. We were very fortunate that the agencies that received the surveys actually did, 87% of them actually did finish this monster of a survey. And in addition to the survey completion, as I've mentioned, I've been communicating with managers around the country for years, and received emails from at least another 40 transit managers that responded to questions that I had asked them about how they were becoming more efficient and more effective. I mentioned the dozens of newspaper and magazine articles that are more recent vintage, and when you add it all up, we found well over 200 techniques that were being employed by transit agencies. It was over 100 different transit agencies around the country. And I should say this as well, that a couple of years ago there was a webinar presented here and presented by myself that was on a similar subject, but that was about 2 years and 9 months ago, and I just wanted to assure everyone that the information provided in this webinar is new and it's different and more recent. And I think if you found this particular webinar, if you find this webinar interesting, then I would encourage you to go back and see the other webinar, because you'll find a lot more techniques not covered here. So who responded to the survey? You see the map here of all of the agencies around the United States that took the time to do it. There are 17 different states that are represented, and the symbols represent whether they are large, small, or medium systems. It's good geographic coverage. My apologies to the flyover states, but they had their chance to respond to the survey, but chose not to. And it represents also a good cross-section of the type of agencies around the country. Of the 40 agencies responding, 10 of them were considered large, meaning they have more than 500 vehicles. 17 were medium, where they have between 100 and 500 vehicles, and 13 were small systems with less than 100 vehicles. I won't dwell on the negative experiences that so many agencies experienced in terms of layoffs and hiring freezes and all those ugly situations that we had to go through, but we do remember these things, and that red X over those doors is a bus in MARTA that was painted that way so that people would know that in a few weeks they weren't going to have the service on that bus anymore on that route. There were also considerable impacts on customers. APTA did some surveying back in 2010, and they found that 84% of the agencies responding indicated that they had considered raising fares or cutting service or both, and that by April 2010, 59% had already done so, and more were about to. The headlines in the papers that you see here are from around the country, indicating how severe the service reductions were going to be around the various cities that transit serves. And you can see that none of them are good, and many of them very, very serious. And the transit agencies that filled out this survey indicated that they it took a lot of actions to reduce and change service in one way or another. You'll see that the most prominent change was to reducing service on low demand routes. And in addition to that, there were also routes that were completely eliminated, frequency that was reduced, weekend service was reduced, span of service was reduced, and others had eliminated Sunday service or reduced evening service. So there were a lot of pretty severe actions that were taken. Employees also felt the effects of the recession, and this chart shows that a number of things occurred that affected the folks that work at transit agencies, the most significant being the increased sharing of costs for benefits, particularly medical benefits. But for others, there was no more cost of living adjustments. When it came to represented employees, many of them saw work rule modifications that perhaps in many cases were long overdue, but nonetheless it was something different for them that they had to deal with, and employees did experience these negative effects. In fact, some agencies reported eliminating up to 30% of administrative positions. There was just a lot of reorganizations reported, and consolidation of functions, a closing of certain facilities, restructuring, making job descriptions much broader, flattening the organization. And in some cases, there really was, as a second bullet indicates, a very difficult environment, a deep sense of grieving during this layoff period, as you might expect. through no fault of their own. People were aware that their job was probably going to be eliminated. And this had some repercussions in terms of levels of stress. Morale certainly took a dive. There was risk avoidance, people not wanting to make any mistakes for fear of being let go, and in some cases withdrawal. Now, I'm not saying this happened in each and every agency, but the reductions were so severe at some agencies that these sort of things were occurring. And the type of responses that you see here came from a number of the respondents saying, hey, there's a limit to just how much smarter anybody can work. And in some cases out in Long Beach Transit, they said, well, we had to give our managers permission to do less because they could no longer do everything they used to do. There were fewer people to do it and at least as much, if not more, work to do. In fact, the ARA program came out providing millions of dollars for capital funding, and they had to do all of that in addition to what they had been doing before. And I think it's probably accurate to say that the best way that transit agencies found to deal with it was to be sure that they kept employees aware of what was going on, that they communicated with them very openly, let them know when any layoffs were going to occur, let them continue working while they were looking for other work. And in a few agencies, they said there was actually survivor's guilt, people who had not been let go, who felt rather bad about the fact that they were still there and their friends and comrades were not any longer there. Phil, Stephanie, just wanted to check in and make sure I'm still coming through.
Yes, you are, Joel.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. In addition to some of those service, or not service reductions, but personnel reductions, a number of functions within the transit agencies were being outsourced as one way of dealing with the financial crunch that they were experiencing. And this chart shows the various activities that the respondents engaged in to help reduce their cost, including outsourcing of fixed route operations, of course, Paratransit, which has long been outsourced to a great extent, but even vehicle maintenance was being outsourced, as well as grounds and facility maintenance. In some cases, things like marketing or some aspects of administration were outsourced. So these sort of things, again, contributed, I think, to some of the unease that was happening within transit agencies. And the consequence of this fiscal constraint was that in spite of 59% of all responding agencies providing fewer total service hours in fiscal year 2012 than they did in 2008, which is unusual. Over the course of 4 years, this many agencies were providing less service. The majority of agencies carried more passengers per hour and more total passengers in fiscal year 12 than they did in fiscal year 8. So what we see is that transit agencies were becoming much more efficient, partially due to necessity, but also due to better management, which we'll take a look at shortly. And I think, as the phrase goes, you never want to waste a good crisis. There were actions taken by management that they probably couldn't have taken in better times, but they really had to take at this point, and their policy boards realized that as well, and approved making changes that would be otherwise hard to make. And in that sense, then, necessity being the mother of invention, creativity and or desperation is still alive and well when these kind of severe reductions are forced upon you. And the issue is really quite significantly large when you lose a large part of your sales tax revenue or your property tax revenue. And the techniques that we're going to cover here might not bridge all of these budget gaps. However, it still puts a dent in the budget gap and allows transit agencies to continue with as much service as they possibly can. And some of these actions that we'll review in a few minutes were pretty significant, bringing in millions of dollars in revenue or hundreds of thousands in savings, while others were much smaller, perhaps 5,000, 10,000 here or there. But no matter how large or small, all of those actions provided evidence that the transit managers and the systems they managed were doing everything possible in their community to avoid cutting service, taking away service, or going to the public to ask for more tax support. And that in and of itself is extremely important. Everybody could see that transit agencies were working very hard to overcome the difficulty of the Great Recession. And the survey asked the agencies how they felt they were doing in 2012 compared to 2008. 2008 being the year just before the Great Recession really started to kick into effect, and 2012 being 4 years later, but still the economy only slowly recovering. And as you can see on this table, 50% of the respondents indicated they were either doing more with the same, in which sense they were luckier than many, they still had the same amount of budget, but there were also agencies, 27% of them, that said that they were doing more with less. And it was a very small minority of agencies that said that they were doing more with more, because there were some area of the countries that weren't in a big real estate market. There wasn't a lot of change in their property tax revenue, or they weren't getting a lot of tourists, so their sales tax revenue didn't change all that much. And I think that one of the primary contributing factors to the increased efficiency and effectiveness of transit agencies since the Great Recession started was that transit managers have simply become more data-driven. They are taking advantage of a lot of new technology that allows them to do some phenomenal analysis. And the first bullet lists out a number of the programs that various transit agencies have instituted at their locations. And they all have different names, like in Cleveland they call it Transit Stat, and at Chicago Transit Authority, the Performance Measurement Program, as you can see, Trans Track at San Joaquin in California, or the Results Matters program in MTA. Now, all of these, though, have the same basic reason for being. They provide business intelligence solutions. And all of that data that's being collected from all the different sources throughout the agency can now be more meaningfully put together and give good information for managers as they review what's going on in their agency, so that they can develop plans to ensure optimal operations and performance. And we'll see some of those in the slides coming up. In addition to their own internal analysis that they are able to do with all this rich data that they have, 18 transit agencies around the country, and a few of them within the group that responded to the survey, have joined the American Bus Benchmarking Group. And this is a fairly recent vintage, just a couple of years old now. And it's populated by systems that said, yes, we like to measure ourselves against ourselves over time, but we also like to measure ourselves against our peers. And so individually, they have agreed to contribute to actually a university in London that has been doing similar work for a lot of European transit systems, allowing them to do peer comparisons and a lot of performance analysis. And within this American Bus Benchmarking Group, they're able now to compare their performance in many, many different areas to the performance of peers throughout the country in the United States. Clearly, we've seen much more efficient bus operations these past 4 years. And this chart gives an idea of the popularity of the various steps that transit agencies have taken. Everything from comprehensive operations analysis, that some have totally made service design changes in their communities. 65% use automatic passenger counters, and 78% are using AVL, automatic vehicle locators. They're almost 70% are using run-cutting software, and even 50% are using now service standards that are becoming more standards than they are just guidelines. They have some teeth to them, and it's important that they do. In the past, I think when times were better, they could regard service standards as, hey, that's nice, but if we need to accommodate some political situation, we'll do it. During the last few years, when they were suffering from revenue reductions, they said, no, these standards really mean something, and we've got to make decisions on where to allocate service based on something that makes good sense. And you can see the results, that increased passengers per mile occurred in 62% of the survey respondents, and increased passengers per hour in 74%. And that's very good performance. Not so many increased passengers per capita, but they were very, very pleased with the fact that in spite of the loss of service hours and service miles, their productivity and efficiency increased substantially. And in fact, in many cases, even though they did have to reduce service hours, they actually increased their ridership. In the area of paratransit, there were many opportunities to save some money. And the picture that you see here is from the Orange County Transportation Authority in California, in the Anaheim area. And it's an in-house assessment center with a real bus in there with a complete simulation of what a passenger would experience on the road out there in public. And it has curbs and curb cuts and crosswalks and traffic signals and bus stops and the bus itself. And so people who are asking for service via paratransit, when they are asking to be qualified, are brought into this assessment center where they are put through a full range of tests to see if they can navigate a street, if they can get on or over a curb, if they can get through the center aisle of a bus, if they can deal with the fare box, all of those things. And at that point, the transit agency can make a really good determination, well, this person can or cannot use fixed route service. A similar type of a facility has been built in Washington, D.C., and what they found was that there in Washington, D.C., their paratransit expenses were going up 20% every year for 4 years. They were using rehab centers to do the determination of eligibility. But what they found was that the rehab centers were not asking any questions about, well, would you consider alternatives to paratransit? And so places like Orange County and WMATA took it into their hands to say, we will make those determinations. We'll have medical people on site as well, but we'll be able to put people through the paces to see just what they can and can't handle. And of course, it makes a world of difference to a budget. Out in Orange County, they say it costs them $50 for every paratransit, one-way paratransit trip they provide, as opposed to about $3.50 for a fixed route service. So you can see how the savings would add up very, very quickly there. And when a passenger does come into the assessment center, well, they shouldn't be that frightened. They're either going to be found to be eligible to utilize paratransit services, or they're going to get a half-price fare card, or they will participate in travel training and become fixed route users and have more mobility and freedom to move around when they would like to. Many other savings were found in paratransit as well. Some agencies stopped using cutaways so much and switched to minivans or even hybrid vehicles like Prius where they could, or vehicles that ran on propane to save substantially on fuel. Where a cutaway might get 7 or 8 miles per gallon, the minivan might get 15 to 20, and of course a hybrid might get much, much more. And that results in many tens of thousands of dollars in savings per year for their paratransit fleet, maybe hundreds of thousands. Others have used taxis, incorporated them into their paratransit mobility services so that they could handle short trips, that might only cost $8 by taxi that would otherwise be costing over $30 by their contracted paratransit provider. Or for hard-to-route trips or for times when demand is unusually high and you don't want to have a standard fleet that can meet the maximum demand every day. That doesn't happen every day, so that would be wasteful. But if you can go ahead and use taxis to fill in the gaps, that helps to keep the cost down. In Milwaukee County, they prepared a 15-minute video, a DVD, and they went out to a variety of places, including assisted living centers, so that they could educate passengers on the fixed route alternatives that were available to them. And they indicated a clear reduction in the use of paratransit as a result of showing this video and letting people realize, yes, there are other ways of getting around, and I'm willing to try. A few agencies reported that they were partnering with local nonprofit agencies that would be able to provide trips to people perhaps not ADA eligible, but for people who were nonetheless transportation disadvantaged. And the transit agency would typically provide the vans to these nonprofit agencies and provide driver training to the drivers as well. But then the nonprofit agency would transport thousands of people throughout the course of a year, which reduced the load on the public transportation agency to have to provide such trips. Clearly, scheduling software and mobile data terminals have increased productivity considerably in the paratransit area. Toledo reported a productivity increase of 25% with the introduction of their scheduling software, which meant they could provide 25% more paratransit trips at no additional cost. And finally, the interactive voice response systems that are used by paratransit systems, whereby a call can be placed to the passenger a few minutes before the van or vehicle is about to arrive at their house or apartment or business or whatever, helps to reduce no-shows and helps to reduce the dwell time that might have otherwise occurred, where the driver would have to get out of the vehicle and go up and knock on the door and wait for people to come out. So those are some of the things that have been going on in the paratransit field to save money. Maintenance departments have also contributed, as every department in transit agencies have. And what we find is that a number of systems are expanding the electrification of different bus components, including the cooling of the engine or the air conditioning system or power steering or doors. All of the things that can help to reduce the load on a transit engine and save as much as 15% on fuel, which is considerable. I mean, that could be a couple of $1,000s a year per bus, and that adds up to be a big number over the life of a bus. You're not going to have a CNG fleet unless you've got a maintenance manager that's willing to do it, and a number of fleets around the country are seeing the advantage of converting to CNG in terms of cost. Right now, the real savings when you do an apples-to-apples comparison between CNG and clean diesel is somewhere between $1 and $1.50. So that too adds up to millions of dollars in many transit agencies per year, and something worth doing. Out in Phoenix, they decided to bring light rail, which they've introduced in the community over the past 10 years. They brought that in-house with considerable savings of $1.6 million. But on the other hand, North County Transit District in San Diego contracted out their bus maintenance and saved over $250,000 there. So everything is based on local situations and circumstances and has to be looked at closely as to whether you might contract it out or bring it back in. One of the bigger things that's going on right now that will have some real dramatic impacts is the use of third-party vendors to help transit agencies with the inventory for their buses and vehicles. These are vendors that are very good at supply chain logistics. They have great experience in it. They know what they're doing, and they can provide just-in-time inventory. They can do a complete analysis of when parts need to be replaced, and they can also buy in bulk. There are circumstances where neighboring transit properties are teaming together and using one vendor, and this helps to bring down the cost per part. And that enables also the people that were working parts at the transit agency to do something else, perhaps more productive. The software for maintenance has been around for a number of years, but it's becoming more prominent, and everything from preventive maintenance to fluid consumption can be monitored and planned for, and actions can be taken accordingly with the good data that they're getting. And in some places, they reported using developmentally challenged people to clean their buses, particularly the interior of the buses, trying to avoid any difficulties with organized labor by having them do tasks that perhaps wouldn't have been done by them. There were a number of reports of savings from putting more environmentally appropriate facilities in place. And SEPTA, as one example, you can see here, just with their one headquarters building, is saving $100,000 a year, or 12% of their utility costs at that facility, by taking all of these actions that you see here, whether it's cleaning the offices during the day instead of the night so that lights don't have to be on and air conditioning doesn't have to be as strong during the night. Motion detection for lights that only come on when someone's there who needs them. More energy efficient AC systems and elevators and escalators, installing LED, much more efficient lighting wherever they can, putting film on any south-facing windows to block the sun and require less AC, and even considering putting wind power to capture energy from the roof of their headquarters. And as you see below, they are installing a wayside energy storage device at substations that will save $190,000 a year. And in addition to that, the energy that they collect from these substations can then also be sold on the open market to those who purchase energy to be used by others. Other examples of savings from more efficient utilities were in Connecticut and in Long Beach, where they have installed base interruptible programs, meaning that when there's peak demand for service in the community, these transit agencies have agreed to use generators for that time when there's extreme demand. And in exchange for that, being willing to do that, the electric power providers reduce the electricity rates for the transit systems for all the other times during the various days. And at PSTA, you see the picture on the right, where they use trash compactors powered by solar power. And they have sensors in them that will send a message to the home office saying that, hey, I'm full, I need to be emptied, and therefore they only send out people to empty these things when it's absolutely needed, and that has saved them about $9,000 a year. Again, kind of a small thing, but everything adds up, particularly if you're a smaller agency. And out in San Jose, California, they're a little bit more aggressive. In the picture on the right bottom, you'll see that the solar panel canopy systems were installed in their bus parking lots, which provided some shade for the buses, which was good. But it also provided savings on future energy costs. They did not pay for the panels. They had an agreement with the panel provider and with Wells Fargo, where as long as they bought those panels, they would agree to buy energy from the providers of the energy, and it would be at a lower rate than what they were paying for other electricity. And it also helped to reduce their carbon footprint, which of course is all very good. Another major expense is healthcare costs and workers' compensation. Many agencies around the country reported that they were deciding to self-insure rather than pay high premiums to insurance companies. And the example you see here at top is the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority. Found out that, well, you know what, we took a look at our last 5 years and we paid $5.4 million more in premiums than there were in claims. So this isn't making much sense. Let's go ahead and self-insure ourselves for everything under $100,000, and they expect to be saving millions over the years through this technique. Many agencies reported higher co-pays for health insurance, although they offered to their employees the opportunity to have those co-pays reduced if they participated in wellness programs. Many, perhaps most, transit agencies are now contracting for what's known as third-party administrators to handle things like workers' comp claims and the FLMA claims. There are people with much greater expertise outside the transit agency than our own, and it's probably a good thing for having someone outside the agency make these determinations of FLMA eligibility. It could be very tense within the transit office if one employee is arguing against another employee. So most agencies have gone to that technique. And most agencies are reporting that they are providing alternative work assignments for those who are out on workers' compensation, and they perform light duty and a variety of other tasks until they can come back. But the experience has been that most employees say, well, you know, I'm back to work already doing something. I might as well do what I actually do best. And at WMATA, they experienced a reduction in days off away from work from 91 all the way down to 47. I mentioned earlier that technology has been something that has been a real blessing for transit agencies. 20 years ago we didn't have this sort of capability that we have now, but things like automated vehicle location systems, a signal priority, helps to improve scheduling and on-time performance, also resulting in much better customer satisfaction and in fact a reduced need for street supervision, as many reported. So there is money to be saved there and service to be improved. The automatic passenger counters have allowed transit agencies to, with almost surgical precision, reduce the amount of service they provide on certain routes or by certain time of day or certain segments of routes. They can really get it to that fine a detail. They can identify bus stops that should be eliminated, which will help make the bus run faster. And it also reduces the amount of surveying that might be required, certainly on ridership surveys, if you have these automatic passenger counters out there. Cleveland reported that they have installed the audible pedestrian warning system for buses that are making right turns. And it indicates, an enunciation that says a bus is coming, be careful. And it used to be that they would hit a few pedestrians now and then, but those sort of incidents have vanished with this sort of technology. We've mentioned scheduling software before for paratransit, but also for fixed route. It helps to reduce overtime. It helps to reduce deadhead mileage. And these things are major cost drivers, and substantial savings have been accruing to the agencies. Many systems reported using different kinds of software platforms, this one being the Enterprise Resource Planning Platform, for the similar sort of efficiencies in a variety of other functions within the transit system. And of course, there should be no big surprise. I mean, every big business now uses all kinds of software to help them improve their efficiency, but it's really taken hold in transit as well with great results. And security cameras, as most everybody is familiar, has led to arrests, but also to lower claims from people who had claimed that they were injured on bus during an accident. More examples of technology applications are the multimodal trip planners on agency websites, or interactive voice response systems in customer service centers that allow that staff to either be reduced or to do other valuable things with new social media that's taking hold in so many communities. Out in San Joaquin, they developed something they called Text Bus. Others have called, Next Bus or One Bus Away, and it provides real-time information on demand for people for each bus stop, and people can get that information right on their smartphones. Something called virtualization technology with computers has allowed the number of computers and servers to be reduced, and saving, honestly, Long Beach Transit indicated a $200,000 savings in 1 year. Others reported over $100,000 a year. And in addition to not needing as many servers or replacing them, it reduces the power consumption and the need for keeping those units cool. Wi-Fi has been placed on some express buses. In San Jose, they indicated that ridership increased 8% on their express buses once they did that. And I mentioned earlier about social media. It's certainly improving customer information, but it also helps transit agencies to reduce the cost of any printed materials, since now it can be downloaded to anything you've got, an iPad or a smartphone or your desktop. And it also permits good two-way communication. Well, so those are some of the ways that money is being saved, and here are some of the ways that money is being generated. More and more digital advertising is being used. You can see the bus down at the bottom left. That's actually an LED digital sign on the bottom of that bus. And but it's also being put at kiosks, at transit stations, on billboards that are on transit properties. And Chicago Transit Authority indicates it's going to be making $3.3 million a year through that method. And ads, I guess they're with us forever. They're not just on bus shelters or on the side of buses, but they're on your fare cards, they're on system maps, they're on websites, they're even on the floors of buses now, and it's bringing dollars into the transit system. We've seen examples of trains as well as buses being wrapped. In Denver, they're going to be making $1.6 million this year, and that's going to grow over time with their light rail that's covered with advertising. And audio advertising I reported on a couple of years ago, but it's now in place in over a dozen communities around the country, most of them mid-sized properties, and most of them expecting to earn about $60,000 to $100,000 a year over the next few years, and probably more going forward. The nice thing is it doesn't cost the transit agency anything to have this implemented. It's put in by the vendor. And it also provides opportunities for smaller businesses to do some advertising on transit. And now, most recently, alcohol ads are becoming more common. They were banned for a number of years in a number of cities, but I guess people figured, hey, we're in the big city, and I think we've seen alcohol before. They do try not to have them on routes that go by schools, but it is making a lot more revenue for systems. This picture is kind of interesting. It's of it's a company called peapod.com, and what they do is provide a virtual grocery shopping experience within this Chicago Transit Authority section of one of their train stations. And people can just take out their smartphone and scan any of these products that they see pictured on the wall, and that product will then be delivered to them at home. And it's just a nice way of providing a convenience to passengers that can do their shopping as they're doing their transit travel. CTA has also partnered with Groupon to sell 3-day passes to visitors from all over the country and all over the world, attracting thousands of new users. They sell their normal 3-day pass to Groupon for about half the price they would normally ask for it, and Groupon makes a couple of dollars, and hopefully, and they're responsible for it. They bought them, and they have to sell them or basically pay the entire price. You see the picture on the bottom left is of a red box video kiosk. Again, the Chicago Transit Authority has been very active in this area, and it allows, again, a passenger convenience for people to pick up their videos, and about 7% of all revenues come back to the CTA. But the big money maker for transit systems right now is the placement of ATMs at transit stations. As you see here, they're going to be collecting over $1 million per year, not per station, but for all of their stations through ATMs at their stations. Naming rights has been around for a while in many different areas, including transit. Some examples that you see here: Barclays in New York City Transit, they paid $4 million for their system. Their station in Brooklyn, the Barclays Center, SEPTA received $3 million from AT&T. TriMet has also been selling naming rights to their streetcar stops for about $500 a month, and also the naming rights to the streetcars themselves for $25,000 a year, and it's bringing in a nice bit of revenue stream for them. One of the advantages when you do have to downsize is that you've got empty spaces that you can then lease, and SEPTA's making the most of it, making over $7 million in revenue from leased empty office space. Up in Boston, the MBTA sold bonds secured by future parking revenues and for their 50,000 parking spaces, and received a lump sum payment that they used to help retire some of their long-term debt. And in Miami-Dade, they have leased property under their elevated rail system to property owners who might need it and can use it for parking. I won't go through examples of everything here, but a great way to either share costs, to share costs with providing services is to partner with various entities. In this case, you see listed the public entities. There's a great example out in California where the military base is providing about $1.6 million to the transit agency to provide 12 new routes in their community to serve the base. Many places have agreements with universities now. Rochester has a great deal going with the public school system where they are earning a couple of million extra dollars a year to transport school kids. You've got in Broward County down below, municipalities. They've reached agreements with 20 different municipalities to provide feeder services that link into their regional transit system and expand ridership and bring in more revenue. There's also private partners that have been willing to pay for the cost of additional transit service, including shopping malls. In the Chicago area in particular, business parks are willing to provide feeders from commuter rail stations to their business parks. Hospitals and casinos have been very active with this. And I think the thing to remember is that most of these examples have come about almost by accident, if you will. It's been the public or private entity that's come to seek the transit agency for, hey, can we work with you in some way? And a few transit agencies are now realizing that, well, wait a minute, what if we took the initiative? And places like the Jacksonville Transportation Authority and Rochester, Genesee Regional Transit Authority have designated positions within their staff called business developers, and their sole task is to go out and find partners like this to help to pay for services. And they're not going to hit on every one. In fact, they might only hit on 1 out of every 5 entities that they contact, but 20% of something is better than 100% of nothing, and they're doing a very good job that way, and they're making themselves more relevant in the community in addition to making additional money. And then this last slide shows that there are some new sources of operating revenue out there. Well, they're not huge, but nonetheless, everything counts. And out in California, Marin County, the public did pass a $10 increase in vehicle registration fees. That generated $2 million for transportation, with transit receiving 35% of that amount. In Oregon, the city of Corvallis passed something called a transportation utility fee that treats public transit as if it's a utility like water or sewer or whatever, and it replaces the ad valorem taxes they were receiving, and it's relatively revenue neutral. They're actually getting a little bit more, but the important thing is that it removes transit from the general fund where they're subject to cuts during difficult times. Rhode Island went out with the help of environmental groups called Save the Bay and the Sierra Club, and they got the legislature to pass a 2-cent gas tax, and all of the proceeds, all $9 million, are going to RIPTA for transit. And in Maryland and in Virginia, those 2 states took some bold moves this year. It still may be challenged, but they are going to be collecting sales taxes on internet purchases and using much of those revenues to supplement transportation investments, including public transit. And out in California, they're taking a look at surcharges for any tickets that are purchased to major events, whether they're sporting events or musical events or whatever the case may be. A surcharge would be put on those tickets, and the proceeds would go to transit under the theory that when you have major events like that, you need additional transit service to help minimize the traffic congestion. So I've taken a little bit too much time, but I did want to share those examples with you. And this report, again, will be coming out in the spring of 2014. And we hope that you'll be keeping your eyes open for it. And once it is released, we'll then also put this webinar up on our website so that you can download the pages of it and refer to it whenever you want. And with that, Phil, I'm wrapping up.
Thank you, Joel. On the screen, and again, is how you can submit your question. We've already have several in already. The first one was, Joel, is how does the efficiency of the American transit providers compare with European transit agencies?
I did not study that, so I'd be talking off the cuff on this one. And I think that over the years, European transit agencies have been more efficient, but it may be for a lot of reasons that American transit providers really can't compete with. It might be that there is more compact and dense development. It may be that cars have this amazing tax you have to pay to own a car, where the gasoline is $8 or $9 a gallon. So in general, European systems do operate, I would say they carry more passengers per hour, they carry more passengers per mile, but they've got a lot of help in doing that.
Okay. Our next question is, in your research, what have you found to be the minimum number of passengers per revenue hour to justify retaining service?
Well, it depends on whether you're dealing with a local neighborhood circulator or whether you're dealing with express bus or fixed route, etc. I think for neighborhood circulators, a number I see from quite a few agencies is that they require at least 5 passengers per hour. That would make it much more productive than typical paratransit, but certainly nowhere near as productive as fixed route. And when it comes to fixed route, I think generally speaking, you're going to see you're going to be wanting somewhere in the range of a minimum of 12 to 15 passengers per hour. But again, it depends on the nature of the community, how dense it is, how dispersed it is, what the goals of the community are. But there's no hard and set fast rule. But those numbers kind of would be the type of numbers I would say, well, we need to take a harder look at that route if that's all we're getting.
Okay. Now, if there was one or two ideas that, out of all the ideas you identify through here, that you would recommend a transit agency do first, what would they be?
I think the first would be to set yourself up with this database, with the process in place to really help you analyze what's going on in your system if you haven't done so already. Now a lot of transit agencies have done that. And for years, people said, oh, hey, we have something like this great AVL system, but we're flooded with data and we don't know what to do with it and we can't handle it. Well, hire the expertise that may be needed if you need it to be able to get your arms around that data and get the programs and software in place to allow you to bring all the data in from the various sources, whether it's the fare box or the APCs or the AVLs or others, and then not only do you have good data to work with, but you also need resource in-house, or you need to dedicate your own time to it. Some agencies have dedicated specific budget analysts to do nothing but that, to provide this information to transit managers. And I would also suggest to do what they did in Cleveland, which is to have a weekly or no more than bi-weekly meeting of all the transit managers where they are looking at this data together and coming up with solutions together, so that no one is thinking that, oh, I'm being attacked. You're saying I'm not efficient here. Well, we're not here to attack you. We're here to help you just like you're here to help me. And let's work on this as a team and go forward. So I think that's really the very first thing I would do. That's the most important.
All right. And how about from a paratransit perspective, are there any particular ideas that maybe stood out to you based on all your research in this area over the years?
Well, there's a number of things I like, and I'm not sure I would say one is more important than the other, but I think the ability to do fair but firm assessments of eligibility is probably the most important, because in many communities, paratransit expenses are consuming a very large percentage of the overall public transportation budget. And you look at it and you find that, wow, 30 or 35% of my budget is being used to transport only 2% of my passengers. And that just doesn't make sense on the face of it, but obviously everybody wants to help people who need help the most. However, you just need to be able to say no when no needs to be said. And again, that's one of those cases where you probably couldn't have done this a few years back when revenues were coming in very strong. But now that revenues have tightened up, policy boards have been getting a stiffer backbone in backing staff when they tell someone, you're eligible for fixed route, you're capable of fixed route, and that's the service you're going to use unless you have some real special circumstance that you can't use that particular route at that location. So I think that's important. I think the software is very important, as we saw with the 25% productivity improvement in Toledo, and things like mobile data terminals on board the vehicles really helps to minimize dwell time. Just so many things, but the things I mentioned, I guess, would come near the top of my list.
All right, time for one more question. Knowing what you know now, would you do any things differently if you were running a transit agency?
I'd get into research sooner. No, I think that I want to give incredible credit to the people that are operating transit agencies today. Some of those earlier slides talked about the difficulties that were experienced in terms of staff reductions and the extra workload that people were experiencing. And for all those who are listening today or in the future, I just tip my hat to you for having made it through this. Not only having made it, but actually coming out stronger, but probably coming out more tired. And so what would I do differently? I guess I go back to making sure that I had good data, not just to make good decisions and good analysis, but it's that good data that separates you from the political animals in the world. And when you go to your policy board and be able to, and you can show them, well, here's exactly what the ridership is at this bus stop at this time of day on this segment of the route. People can't refute that anymore. So I just think it's incredibly important not to rely on anecdotal information or experience or things of that nature, but to rely on the data much more, and also to keep your employees fully informed of all the circumstances in terms of the economy and how it affects them. I mean, I think the worst is over, and most transit agencies have got back to somewhere near the same as they were 4 years ago. But it's very slow, it's very gradual, and it's going to continue to be difficult to be a transit manager. And that's why I'm saying I just have a tremendous amount of respect for those who are in that field and actually thriving at this time.
All right. Again, thank you, Joel, for an excellent presentation, and to the audience for their questions. On behalf of the Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida, thank you for attending today's CUTR Webcast. The recording should be on the CUTR website within 24 hours. And as Joel indicated, the final report will probably be published in the spring, so we will let people know by our listeners when that is available as well. Have a great day. Thank you.